Good morning, and I want to present something that I've been working on, which is actually looking at sustainable communication through Instagram and investigation of fast fashion brands. I should actually introduce myself first. I'm Noreen Siddiqui. I'm currently a senior lecturer in marketing at the Adam Smith Business School, University of Glasgow in Scotland. And I've been working on this. I have actually worked on looking at how the fashion sector in particular are using digital communication and how are they engaging their consumers. And in this particular project, what I specifically wanted to review was sustainable communication, especially through Instagram. Now, the structure of this presentation is I'm going to provide you with some background information, look at the literature, the methodology, and actually some of the issues that I've come across in trying to proceed with this research project. Now let's get this moving. Here we go. So the background to this, as we've already touched upon in the previous two presentations, is that sustainability has emerged as a key issue for fashion clothing. And this is looking outside the sector. For example, the UN has highlighted it, and also other organisations, such as the example that I have here of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is looking at redesigning the future of fashion. We know it is contributing to waste, and depending on which reports you look at, some people say it's only second behind the aviation industry, which is absolutely astounding when you think about it. In particular, I wanted to look at fast fashion, because fast fashion have developed a business model which is all focused around production, distribution, consumption, production, distribution, consumption. It is a never-ending cycle that feeds into the constant need for newness, new cycles. And what's happening with these cycles is that in terms of timeline, these cycles have become shorter in time. And what these brands are doing is focusing on the pursuit of profits, on revenue, and looking at market share growth. And as a result of that, over the past decade, we've actually seen an increased consumer awareness of sustainability. And I guess what I'm trying to see is how much of a difference has that actually made, because there is research that has increased in this area. And when they've actually looked at increasing consumer awareness of sustainability, what we've not been able to see is how that awareness can actually influence purchase intention and actual purchasing made. And in particular, when you have fashion brands, especially fast fashion brands, who are constantly feeding new products into the store, constantly communicating new products are in store, the need to be new and to stay current, it really is very, very difficult to actually combine the awareness of sustainability with actual purchase of sustainability. So let's take a look through some of the literature that I thought was very relevant to this project. And in particular, I wanted to really look at how we're emerging from a post-COVID environment. And, you know, let's understand and remind ourselves what happened in COVID. The two most important elements here was the lack of social interactions. So we weren't going out anymore. We weren't meeting our friends. We weren't really meeting our family, and nor were we going out to work. Most of us are working at home. And I have to say that I'm still in the main working at home. And therefore that had an impact on our consumption of fashion. But also not only our consumption of fashion, but what actually happened in the high street. Now, within the UK, and I'm sure it happened in other places as well, because of the nature of the sector, there was a lot of store closures. Some brands were taken over. We lost things, brand names that we actually saw on the high street, and they were actually overtaken, or they just closed down completely. And this time, what it allowed us to do was actually reflect upon our lifestyles and what are the values and what is it that we care for the most. And we actually looked at that across generation X, Y, and Z. And what we found actually was that even though generation X were much more reflective and they were reducing their consumption, and even generation Y were more reflective, generation Z, well, they were a little bit different, and I'll come on to that later on in the presentation. what cannot be denied is that sustainability is now a global movement. You know, we have COP26, we had it here in Glasgow actually last year. And right now at the moment we have COP27 taking place. We've got the industry is coming together through organisations such as Fashion Revolution. We're looking at who developed the Fashion Transparency Index, looking at how transparent fashion brands are in respect to their sustainability initiatives and their impact on the wider environment. We also have Fashion Revolution Week, which takes place at a particular time. And what is in no doubt, in order to succeed within the fashion sector, sustainability has emerged as one of the key factors which are central to success. Moving on, I wanted to look at social media. And why did I want to look at social media marketing? Because before COVID, one could almost argue, or everyone argued, that social media was primarily dominated by the younger age group, the Generation Z. However, what COVID did was actually propelled all age groups much more to digital channels. They started to use social media, and interestingly, they were also using and were on social media for longer periods of time. What we also know about the impact of social media on consumer behaviour is that most consumption now starts and ends on social media. So if we're looking for search, we search on social media, and it ends on social media because we want to wear our fashion item that we've actually purchased and make sure all our friends and family can see what we look like in our new purchases. So that's the sort of importance now that we actually place on social media. And in looking at what fashion brands have now, fashion brands do have a presence of social media networks, an average of 5, and I'm sure that's actually increased as social media networks also increase and change and add more features to what you can actually do. And what has also been established is that Instagram has a role to address issues in the fashion sector. So that's bringing the different elements of what I wanted to try and achieve together here. Okay, so why Instagram? Well, it's got 2 billion active monthly users. Now, this was figures updated from 2022. I'm sure it's gone up. The largest age group is actually 18 to 24, but I'm actually thinking, I think I've made a mistake there. I think it should be 18 to 34. It cuts across Generation Z at the top end and Generation Y at the lower end. And Instagram has developed this feature since it was launched on the marketplace. So it has different formats to actually communicate. So for example, it's got carousels, it's got videos, it's got images, it's got stories. You can use Instagram TV, that can be live. And it also demonstrates social commerce opportunities as well. Now, stories is content that could be images and videos that can last for a specific period of time only. So what it does is it entice excitement in someone who's interested in fashion items. And carousels is we've got a number of different images together that can be viewed very easily by the user. The most popular type of format on Instagram is actually short videos, images, and live videos. I do have figures where you can use pictures or memes. Text-based communication is still very important, as is user-generated content. But by far, the most popular is short videos, images, and live videos. And what does that mean? Now, 90% of users actually follow a brand, an official brand account on Instagram. And 70% of shoppers look towards Insta, as it's well known as, for next purchases. So when they're actually looking and browsing, Instagram is a network that they go for. And 50% of users visit a website after seeing it on stories. So if you're a brand, these are the types of figures that's going to excite you. And what that demonstrates is brand awareness and communication opportunities. So every brand wants to make sure they have a presence on Instagram. Now, the other thing about Instagram is it's a social media network that has been researched consistently in academic research. So, for example, it has been acknowledged as a platform for engagement in fashion. It has been acknowledged in terms of their influence on consumer behaviour. And it also plays a significant role in sustainable fashion consumption. So hence, if I think about sustainable communication, then Instagram as a social media network, it seems to be the right platform to investigate. Now, in terms of fashion brands, well, what do we know about them in relation to sustainability? Now, there is currently a lack of trust, and consumers query the sustainable claims that are made about fashion brands and how they communicate their sustainable credentials. And when they do, most of them focus on environmental efforts rather than social and economic impacts. So they focus on a very small range of sustainable activities. Now, people have done research on the brands that are attempting to be sustainable, and perhaps the brands that are not actually very good at the sustainable practices within the organisation, nor actually communicating what they're doing in terms of their sustainable initiatives. Now, what we've also found is there's a lot of confusion surrounding communication on sustainability, environment, what's actually been achieved. And sometimes that content is presented in a long text-based manner, which sometimes confuses the user. They don't understand it, and they're getting bombarded with different kinds of communication around sustainability. So what we're finding is that the brands are not communicating clearly. They need to be much more focused, and they also need to present sustainable communication in an interesting way. So it can't just all be text. And the interesting thing about sustainable communication is brand posts, which are focused around sustainable communication, does actually result in a good level of engagement from their users. So it is types of content that their users are interested in. Unfortunately, the way that they're actually communicating in it is actually creating a lot of confusion and boredom. So I thought, well, let's see what's going on here. Now, who is this Generation Z that we're talking about? Well, they're a generation that were born between 1995 and 2010. They are regarded as digital natives because they have been surrounded by digital technology. In fact, they cannot remember a time where they did not have access to digital technology at all. They are consumers who consume more digital content than any other generation. They also, so they're constantly on Instagram, they're constantly looking for information. They're actually proactively looking for information, and they consume that information within a digital environment more so than any other environment. They do have an increased awareness on sustainability, and they've had more education on sustainability than previous generations. And young people and Generation Z are aware of the impact now of consumption of fashion on the wider environment that we all live in. But what they also appreciate is brand communication via social media. Excuse me. Now, they check their Instagram at least here 5 times daily. I know that when I speak to students, it's probably more than that, and it definitely is more than that now. However, here's a dichotomy here, and here's a problem that we're trying to solve, is that young female consumers are not sensitive to sustainable features on fashion products. So in other words, if they're shopping for fashion consumption and they actually want to go out and buy something, whilst they have an awareness of sustainability, it's perhaps not in their top 5 priorities when they're browsing and selecting and purchasing fashion products. So price is a key feature. The style and the trend that they're following is also a key feature. And sustainability doesn't necessarily feature high on that list. And therefore, what we have here is there's an inherent dissidence. So on the one hand, there's concerns for the environment, and we want to actually make sure that whatever we do does not impact negatively on the environment, because we realise there's a need to actually protect what we have. But on the other hand, they are indulging in fast fashion. Now, when I looked at fast fashion across generations, X, Y, and Z, and what were they actually doing during COVID, and what I found in that small exploratory research was, compared to generation Y and X, Generation Z was still indulging in fast fashion. And in fact, what they felt was they were buying more, and they were buying more through digital channels. And they were going on to social media because there was nothing else. Part of the reason was there was nothing else for them to do. And therefore, purchasing fashion products and putting themselves on social media actually became a form of entertainment, where they felt it was really exciting, waiting for all these products to be delivered to them. And therefore, Generation Z continued to shop during lockdown. In fact, they were, compared to Generation X and Y, they shopped more. So I had 2 research questions that I wanted to tackle. I'm just checking my time here already. And that is fast fashion brands. How do fast fashion brands communicate their sustainability initiatives through Instagram? And I wanted to look at texts that they use, but also visuals. And then secondly, Generation Z consumers. How do their consumers respond to content focused on sustainability compared with content focused on brand lifestyles? Now, my anticipated outcomes here was that I would achieve how fast fashion brands are communicating the sustainability initiatives, how consumers are responding, are they really interested in it? And what is the relevant type of content for engaging sustainability, and fashion brands who want to actually be more sustainable and transparent about their fashion practices. Now, I was building on emerging research that has actually looked at this, but the key thing that my research differed was that previous research has actually looked at sustainable brands, or in the main sustainable brands. And this is a framework for my research. So I wanted to look at fashion brands. I wanted to look at multi-channel brands as opposed to online-only channels, because I wanted to look at the impact, if there was any, of different business models. And previous research has only focused on 2 or 4 or a small number of fashion brands, whereas I wanted to look at 30. So we actually had a sector viewpoint of what's actually going on. Then I wanted to look at Instagram. I wanted to look at the format, the visuals, the text, and I developed a content analysis and coding system which looked at brand lifestyle communication versus sustainability. And on the right-hand side, we're looking at Generation Z, consumer responses, and we're looking at some stats through likes, comments, and share. And the plan was to frame it around Fashion Revolution Week. So we wanted to look at 4 weeks leading up to this particular week, which highlights sustainability within the fashion sector, and 4 weeks afterwards to see what was actually happening in terms of what content was being posted. Now, I wanted to do a content analysis and statistical analysis, and more importantly, I decided to use a software tool that allows you to download videos, images, and stories on Instagram, which had been used in previous research. However, I came across challenges. Ethics for social media research raises huge issues. And at the University of Glasgow, we have quite a stringent policy, and I'm actually still trying to work through how to get through the ethics process. And there's also ethics related to the use of software too. It has also been challenging, because exactly what do you actually download? How is it looked after? Is there a possibility that you're actually going to be able to trace an individual who's made a comment in social media? Because there are issues that while people are actively pursuing and going on Instagram, it is a public forum. Most users do not expect it to be used for research. So there's huge concerns here for consumer privacy. So what I'm currently doing is I'm working on the ethical green light to let me go ahead. I'm actually looking now at the ethics raised as a result of data collection of software tools and how we can actually make sure we protect user privacy. The other thing that I had to do, that's my time up, is actually look at the terms and conditions of use, not only of Instagram, what is their terms and conditions of use, but also of the software tools that we're using, because ultimately what we're trying to do in this research is protect consumer privacy, as well as trying to achieve what we were trying to do, which was actually look at how fashion brands are communicating the sustainability initiatives and how are consumers actually responding to that. And that is as far as I got to. Thank you very much.